Winterfell stood tall under the grey sky, its walls strong and cold. Lord Eddard Stark, known to many as Ned, stood by the window of his solar, staring at the snow falling lightly over the courtyard. His face was calm, but his mind was full of storms. He'd always followed honor, always done what was right. But this time, he had broken his code for the sake of a child. That child was Jon Snow. Everyone believed he was Ned's bastard, born from a woman Ned would never speak of. Even Catelyn Stark, his wife, lived with the pain of that silence. But the truth was different, far heavier. Jon Snow was not his son. He was the son of Lyanna Stark and Rhaegar Targaryen, trueborn, born in secret, and hidden to save him from Robert Baratheon's hatred. Ned knew that Jon was not just any child. He had the blood of dragons and wolves in him. He could be king. No, he should be king if the world ever became ready for a true heir. But the world wasn't ready yet. So Ned hid the truth and told the world Jon was his shame. But he didn't stop there. When Jon was only 5 years old, Ned began to train him differently. He taught him to be just, to be kind, but also to observe people closely. He made him read about the kings of the past, not just northern lords. While the other Stark children played with wooden swords, Jon was learning history, strategy, and the old stories of Aegon the Conqueror and the doom of Valyria. Maester Luwin thought Jon was simply curious. But it was Ned who quietly guided that curiosity. One cold evening, when the fire crackled softly in Ned's chamber, he looked Jon in the eye and said, "A man must know who he is, even when the world tries to tell him otherwise. You are more than a name, Jon. Never forget that." Jon didn't understand at the time, but those words stayed with him. Far away, across the narrow sea, a young girl with silver hair cried alone in a stone house. Her name was Daenerys, the last dragon at least. That's what her brother told her. She had nothing but pain in her life. Her brother Viserys treated her like a tool, a key to his crown. But there was someone watching her too. Illyrio Mopatis, the rich merchant who later introduced her to Khal Drogo, had once received a letter. A raven had flown from Winterfell to Pentos years ago, under the name of trade talk. But inside it was a note from Ned Stark, asking one quiet favor: keep her safe. She must live. The day may come when the realm will need the fire she carries. Ned had learned of her survival from Varys the Spider. They had once spoken in King's Landing, when Varys hinted at a child across the sea. Ned pretended not to care, but his heart told him otherwise. Though he could not protect her himself, he sent coin through silent paths to keep Daenerys under the eye of those who wouldn't harm her. He had seen enough death. He didn't want the last of the Targaryens to be crushed by the weight of old wars. Years passed. Jon grew into a quiet, honorable young man. Daenerys became a strong, determined woman. They faced their own trials. Jon at the wall, Daenerys in the burning cities of Essos. But behind their eyes, there was always the hidden hand of a man who had died with a secret on his lips. When Ned was taken to the dungeons by Cersei Lannister, he knew his time had come. He prayed not for mercy, but that his choices would one day make sense, that Jon would find his path, that Daenerys would become more than a pawn. Before his death, he sent one last message through Varys, a short whisper, just 4 words. The dragon has ice. Varys never understood it fully, but he kept the message close. And one day, when the world began to burn and the dead walked again, that whisper would echo in the cold winds of destiny. Far beyond the wall, the cold was unforgiving. Jon Snow stood in the frost-bitten woods with Ghost by his side, his breath rising like mist. Nights like these reminded him of his father, or the man he thought was his father. Lord Eddard Stark always looked at Jon differently, not with shame, but with a kind of sorrow. like he was holding back a truth too heavy to speak. Jon didn't know why those memories had returned so clearly now. Maybe it was because he had seen the White Walkers with his own eyes. Maybe it was because he was tired of lies and half-truths. Or maybe, deep down, he knew something was wrong with the story he had been told. He remembered one night at Winterfell. He was 16, standing on the battlements with Ned. Snow was falling gently. "You are not like the others, Jon," Ned had said. "You ask questions the world isn't ready to answer." "What do you mean?" "You'll know, one day. And when that day comes, trust your heart. Not banners, not names, only your heart." Jon never forgot that. Now, as Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, Jon had grown. He had bled. He had watched brothers die and risen again to lead. But still, something haunted him. Something missing. Meanwhile, across the sea, Daenerys Targaryen sat on the stone steps of the Great Pyramid in Meereen. She had freed the slaves, ended cruelty, and broken chains. Yet, ruling was harder than winning. She felt like a stranger in a land that praised her one moment and feared her the next. Late at night, she sat alone, thinking of the past of Viserys, who had used her as a price, of Khal Drogo, who had given her power but died before he could see her rise. And then there were her dragons. They listened to her, yes, but she could feel they were tied to something ancient, something bigger than even her name. Then came the raven. Grey Worm had handed it to her in silence. The scroll was old, the seal unfamiliar, but inside was a note written years ago. "Your fire is not yours alone. When ice awakens, fire must answer. E." Daenerys read the note again and again. Who was E? Could it be someone from Westeros? Someone who knew her? She felt the words deep in her chest. It wasn't a warning. It was a calling. She called Missandei. "Find out where this raven came from. I want to know who sent it, and why." A week later, she got her answer. The raven was traced back to Pentos, but the original sender had died long ago. A merchant named Illyrio had once received it, and it came from the North Winterfell. Stark, Jon and Daenerys, both thousands of miles apart, began feeling something shift around them. People were whispering. Lords were moving. Lords were moving. The world was changing. Back in Westeros, in the dark corners of the Red Keep, Varys stared at the message Lord Eddard had left him before dying. "The dragon has ice." He had puzzled over it for years. But now, with whispers that Jon Snow had been revived after death, and Daenerys had dragons strong enough to burn cities, the words made more sense. Varys wasn't the only one watching. Bran Stark, now touched by the powers of the three-eyed raven, saw it all. He had visions, flashes of the Tower of Joy, when Ned had held a newborn in bloody arms. A woman's voice had whispered, "Promise me, Ned." Bran saw Rhaegar and Lyanna together, not as kidnappers and victims, but as lovers. Jon was their child. The truth was too big to ignore now. Jon Snow was not a bastard. He was Aegon Targaryen, and Daenerys was not alone in her bloodline. As the War of the Dead grew near, as Daenerys sailed west with her Unsullied and her dragons, and as Jon marched south with wildlings and honor, fate was bringing them together. But behind their journey, behind every step they took, was the shadow of a man who had died on the steps of Baelor's Septen walls. Ned Stark. The quiet wolf who had whispered truths into the wind, the one man who had lied to protect the future. And that future was finally waking up. Winds howled outside Castle Black as Jon Snow stared at the flames in the hearth. He had come back from the dead, but something inside him had stayed behind. He felt colder now, more distant. His brothers had seen it too, whispering behind his back. But Jon didn't care. He was starting to realize that he had never truly belonged here, not even among the Night's Watch. He remembered Sam once asking him, "Do you ever wonder who your mother was?" Jon had laughed it off then, but now that question burned in his mind like wildfire. That night, Melisandre approached him quietly, her red eyes glowing in the firelight. She looked at him like he was a god reborn. "You are not just a man, Jon Snow," she said. "You were chosen. Fire and ice are in your blood." He narrowed his eyes. "What do you mean?" "I have seen it. In the flames. You walk with shadows of dragons and wolves. You are the song of fire and ice." Jon didn't know what that meant, but something about her words shook him. She wasn't just speaking in riddles. She knew something. Far away, Daenerys was preparing to leave Meereen. Tyrion had convinced her that the time had come. The Seven Kingdoms were breaking. The Lannisters ruled with fear. The North had risen, and the dead were coming. As her ships gathered, she stood before her dragons Drogon, Rhaegal, and Viserion. They roared as if they felt the storm approaching. Then Missandei brought her another letter. This one came not by raven, but from the hands of a smuggler named Davos Seaworth. It was from Jon Snow. Daenerys read it twice. His words were cautious, respectful, but full of truth. He spoke of the army of the dead, of the Night King, of needing allies, not enemies, and most importantly, he had signed the letter not as a king, but as a servant of the realm. That impressed her. Tyrion, standing nearby, said, "He's not like the others. Ned Stark raised him. He won't bow easily, but he will not lie either." "Ned Stark," Daenerys whispered. "That name keeps following me like a ghost." When her fleet finally sailed across the narrow sea, her heart beat faster with each wave. She didn't just want to conquer. She wanted to understand the pieces of the puzzle. Why had someone from Winterfell protected her all those years ago? Why had Jon Snow Stark's supposed bastard ridden to her like a brother would? When she landed on Dragonstone, she felt the old blood calling. Her ancestors had ruled from this place. It was the last Targaryen stronghold before the fall. Now it was hers again. A few days later, Jon Snow arrived. Their first meeting was tense. He refused to bend the knee. She refused to listen to anything that sounded like disobedience. But deep down, both of them felt something strange, like two rivers finally meeting after traveling different lands. Daenerys noticed his eyes so calm, so sad, eyes that had seen death and didn't fear it anymore. Jon noticed her fire-real, powerful, but not cruel. She wasn't her father. She was something different. As they argued and talked, Varys and Tyrion exchanged knowing glances. Something was happening here. Something Ned Stark had possibly seen long before anyone else. That night, Daenerys stood alone on the cliffs of Dragonstone. The sea crashed below her. Jon walked up beside her, silent. "You believe in this threat, don't you?" she asked. "I've seen it. I died because of it, and came back for it." She looked at him sharply. "You died?" He nodded. She paused. Then she whispered, "Maybe you really are fire and ice." Jon looked at her, confused, but her words reminded him of something Melisandre had said, something Bran had hinted at in his last Raven. "You are the son of Rhaegar and Lyanna." He hadn't told Daenerys yet. He wasn't even sure if he believed it, but he could feel the truth closing in. Back in Winterfell, Bran sat by the heart tree, eyes white, spirit flying through time. He saw it clearly now, Ned holding the baby, tears in his eyes. "His name is Aegon," Lyanna had whispered. "Promise me, Ned." Promise kept. But now that truth was rising, and it would either unite fire and ice, or burn the realm to ash. The fog covered Dragonstone as the sun tried to rise. Jon Snow stood in the war room, staring at the painted table. The map of Westeros was spread before him like a battlefield waiting to happen. Daenerys walked in, her steps quiet but firm. They had spent days planning together, now battles, alliances, strategies. What began with tension had turned into trust. Slowly, piece by piece, a bond was forming between them, one born from mutual respect and something neither of them wanted to name yet. Daenerys leaned against the table beside him. "I used to dream of this map," she said softly. "As a child, I imagined myself flying over it on dragonback, taking what was stolen from my family." Jon looked at her. "And now that you're here," she sighed. "Now that you're here," she sighed. "Now I see more than thrones and castles. I see people who are afraid, starving, dying." He nodded. "You're not like your father." She met his eyes sharply. "Did you think I was?" "No," Jon replied. "But I had to see it for myself." She studied him for a moment, then said, "You're not like other men, Jon Snow." Neither of them said it, but the space between them held something unspoken, a pull, a whisper. Fate was working behind their backs, just as Ned Stark had planned years ago. That very night, a raven came from Winterfell. Bran's message was simple, but it changed everything. Jon is the son of Lyanna Stark and Rhaegar Targaryen. He is the true heir to the Iron Throne. Jon couldn't breathe. He read the letter again and again. His hands trembled, but not from fear, from betrayal. Ned Stark, the man he had loved more than anyone, had lied to him his whole life. Daenerys read the letter too. Her face turned pale. "Rhaegar was my brother," she whispered. "That makes you my blood." She whispered, "That makes you my blood." Jon took a step back. "I never asked for any of this." "No," she said, "but it's yours." The room turned cold. "I'm not a king," Jon said. "I don't want the throne." "But the realm might need you to take it," she replied. There it was. The beginning of the storm Ned Stark had tried so hard to control. 2 dragons, 1 throne. Varys and Tyrion talked in whispers in the halls. "If Jon has the better claim, the lords will follow him," Varys said. "And if Daenerys feels threatened?" Tyrion asked. "She may not let the people choose," Varys replied grimly. "Fire can burn more than enemies." But Tyrion shook his head. "She's not her father." "No," Varys said. "But blood is a powerful curse." In Jon's chambers, he sat in silence, ghost at his feet. His mind went back to Winterfell, to Ned's soft voice, to the way he used to grip his shoulder before speaking hard truths. Maybe this was what Ned had been preparing him for all along. Jon knew leadership. He had led men beyond the wall, united wildlings and watch brothers, fought the dead and the living alike. But ruling a kingdom, that was something else. That was politics, lies, crowns. He had never wanted it. Daenerys, on the other hand, had spent her life chasing that destiny. It was hers by blood, by fight, by right. But now, Jon's name stood in her path, and that made everything harder. They met again the next day on the same cliffs where they had spoken before. "I'm not your enemy, Daenerys," Jon said quietly. "But you are my rival," she answered, voice tight. "Even if you didn't ask to be. I don't want the throne." She turned to him, eyes flashing. "But what if they give it to you anyway?" He didn't answer. She took a step closer. "Do you think people will follow me if they know who you really are?" Jon looked at her, pain in his eyes. "What do you want me to lie about who I am?" "No," she said, almost whispering, "but I want to trust you not to take what I've built." Their silence said more than words ever could. The truth had finally reached them. But truth had finally reached them. But truth is dangerous in Westeros. From the shadows of Dragonstone, a raven flew toward Winterfell. It carried Bran's second letter. one he had written not to Jon, but to Sansa. Jon is not our brother. He is the heir. Be ready. The North may not follow Daenerys, and she may not forgive him for that. Sansa read it under candlelight, her face turning cold. She had always feared Daenerys, but now she feared what Daenerys might do to Jon. In the north, wolves waited. In the south, lions prepared. And in Dragonstone, two dragons stood too close to each other, and the fire between them was starting to burn. The wind on Dragonstone was restless, as if the sea itself sensed the tension rising in the castle above. Jon Snow paced back and forth in the dark corridors, haunted by truths he hadn't asked for. He hadn't spoken to Daenerys since the letter from Bran. They were both avoiding each other, both too proud and too afraid to face what their blood now demanded of them. He remembered Ned Stark's face again, that calm, patient strength. All his life, Jon had believed he was a mistake, a shameful secret. Now he had learned he was the last male Targaryen, and he hated it. He didn't want power. He didn't want to sit on a throne built by blood. But now, no matter what he wanted, others were beginning to choose sides. Tyrion had noticed the change. She doesn't look at him the same anymore, he whispered to Varys one evening. Not with hope, but with fear. And fear, Varys said, is the first crack in a ruler's heart. In the war room, Daenerys stood silently over the map of Westeros. Her hands were clenched, tight, knuckles white. She had been raised on stories of stolen crowns, of enemies who pretended to be friends, of traitors who smiled before stabbing. She had given everything for this moment. Crossed deserts, burned slavers, survived betrayals. And now, Jon Snow, the man she had begun to trust, the man she had maybe begun to love now, stood in her path. Missandei entered the room quietly. You haven't slept, Khaleesi. I'm not tired, Daenerys replied coldly. You fear him, Missandei said. But he doesn't want the throne. He's told you that. Daenerys turned, her voice sharp. He says he doesn't want it now. But what about later? What if people beg him? What if they see him as the better ruler? Missandei paused, then let them choose. Daenerys looked away, the pain in her chest too heavy to carry. If they choose him, they reject me. After everything I've done, they still look to a man. Missandei didn't answer. She only bowed her head and left. Back in Winterfell, Sansa read Bran's second letter again. Her face was unreadable. Arya watched her from across the room. He's still our brother, Arya said. No, Sansa replied. He never was. Arya's eyes narrowed. You think that changes anything? Sansa looked at her carefully. It changes anything. Sansa looked at her carefully. It changes everything. The North will never kneel to a dragon queen. And Jon, he may not want the throne, but he has it whether he likes it or not. What are you saying? Sansa walked to the window, her breath fogging up the glass. I'm saying we need to be ready. Because if Daenerys feels threatened, she won't hesitate to burn everything down, including Jon. Arya said nothing, but her hand drifted to the hilt of her dagger. Back on Dragonstone, the council gathered. Jon stood beside Daenerys, though they hadn't spoken a word privately in days. A report had come in. Cersei had reinforced King's Landing. She had no intention of surrender. The Golden Company had arrived. War was now guaranteed. As they planned the attack, tension crackled between the two leaders. We strike the Red Keep directly, Daenerys said firmly. If we take Cersei's head, the war ends quickly. Jon shook his head. Thousands will die. Innocents. She uses them as shields, she snapped. We can't let that stop us. And if we become the same as her? Jon asked. What's the difference between us and tyrants, then? Daenerys' voice turned cold. I am not a tyrant. No, Jon replied softly. But you're walking the edge. The room fell silent. Grey Worm stepped forward, eyes hard. We follow the Queen. Tyrion spoke next. Or we find a better way. Daenerys's eyes swept the room like dragon fire waiting to ignite. Do you doubt me too, Tyrion? He hesitated. I serve the realm, not just a throne. That night, Jon stood on the cliffs again, wind in his face, doubt in his heart. Daenerys found him there. He didn't turn when she approached. She spoke first. You have a choice to make, Jon. I already made it, he said. I chose to follow you. But your name, she whispered. I don't care about my name, he said, finally facing her. I care about what's right. She stepped closer. Then bend a knee again, publicly. Show them I'm the Queen. Jon looked into her eyes, filled with fire and fear. I'll follow you, he said, but I won't lie. Not to them. Not to myself. Her lips trembled. Then you're a threat. No, Jon said. No, Jon said. I'm just the truth. And sometimes, the truth was the most dangerous weapon of all. The silence between Jon and Daenerys after that night grew heavier with each passing day. They still stood in the same war room, gave orders to the same armies, fought the same enemy. But trust had quietly died between them. Daenerys began holding her meetings without him. She spoke more to Grey Worm and less to Tyrion. Varys watched her carefully, noting how her eyes no longer held hope but suspicion. She is slipping, he said quietly to Tyrion one night. Not yet into madness, but fear has gripped her heart, and fear makes rulers cruel. Tyrion rubbed his face in frustration. She believes Jon will take the throne from her, and she's not wrong to fear that, Varys said. The realm loves heroes. They remember the man who came back from the dead, who stood against the Night King. They will follow Jon, but Jon doesn't want it. Varys gave him a sharp look. What a man wants and what the world pushes him to become, those are never the same. He leaned closer. We must decide, Tyrion, who truly deserves to rule. Who will keep the realm from burning? Tyrion didn't answer. He couldn't. His loyalty was tearing in two. Across Dragonstone, in the dragon pit carved into the mountain, Daenerys stood before Drogon and Rhaegal. She placed a hand on Drogon's warm, scaly neck and closed her eyes. They think I'm becoming my father, she whispered. But I am not the Mad King. I bring fire for justice, not for fear. Drogon growled softly, as if he could sense the storm inside her. Suddenly, footsteps echoed in the cavern. Missandei entered, face pale. They're whispering about you, Khaleesi. Some say Jon should rule. Daenerys turned slowly, her voice tight. Who? Missandei hesitated. I don't know, but Varys has been sending ravens. A long silence followed. Then Daenerys said, quietly but firmly, if I am to rule, they must fear what happens if they betray me. Missandei blinked. You want to make an example. Daenerys' eyes glowed with resolve. If Varys is spreading treason, then Varys must burn. The tide whispered against the rocks as he stood calmly, hands tied. Jon watched, horrified, but said nothing. Tyrion, heartbroken, walked to Varys and whispered, It was me. I told her. Varys simply nodded. I hope I'm wrong about her, but I fear I'm not. Daenerys stepped forward, Drogon crawling from the shadows. She didn't hesitate. Dracarys, she whispered, and fire swallowed the spider whole. The next morning, the air on Dragonstone was different, cold, heavy. The silence was not peaceful. It was afraid. Jon confronted her privately in the halls. You didn't need to burn him. He was wrong. But he betrayed me, Daenerys snapped. Do you think I'll survive this world by being soft? Jon stared at her. The woman he had once admired, the woman he had started to love. She was slipping away from him, inch by inch. I didn't come here to watch another Targaryen rule with fire and fear, he said. She stepped closer. Then bend the knee and swear your loyalty, not just in words, but in truth. Say it, Jon. Say you won't take the throne, that you will never claim it. Jon's jaw clenched. I already said I don't want it. That's not enough. Jon backed away. You want more than loyalty. You want silence. Daenerys didn't deny it. Meanwhile, in the north, Sansa had received word of Varys' execution. Her fears were now certain. She's not stable, Sansa told Arya. She's burning the ones who speak the truth. Jon is in danger. Arya nodded. Then we do what we must. Sansa sent a raven to Jon that same night. Come home. You're not safe. The Dragon Queen is losing control. Back in Dragonstone, Jon read the message in secret. His heart pounded. He had tried to do the right thing. He had stayed loyal. But now, he was beginning to see what Varys had seen, what Ned Stark had perhaps feared. Daenerys was standing at the edge of a cliff, and if she jumped, she would take the whole realm down with her. War was coming. The battle for King's Landing was only days away, but the real war, the one for the soul of the throne, had already begun. And this time, truce alone would not save anyone. The black sails of Daenerys' fleet cut through the sea like blades. The shores of King's Landing were now in sight. From the decks of the ships, soldiers whispered and glanced at the skies, where two dragons circled above Drogon and Rhaegal, wings casting huge shadows over the waters below. Jon Snow stood among the Unsullied on one of the ships, his face cold and distant. He had barely spoken to Daenerys since Varys was burned alive. She had become harder, her silence more dangerous than her words. The woman who once freed slaves and brought hope now ruled with fire in her eyes. Tyrion approached him on the deck, voice low. If the bells ring, it means they've surrendered. Make sure she hears them. Jon didn't look at him. Will she stop? Tyrion didn't answer. That silence was more frightening than any warning. Far above them, Daenerys flew Drogon high into the clouds. The city below was huge walls, towers and thousands of innocent people trying to live their small lives, trapped under Cersei's rule. But Daenerys didn't see them anymore. She saw Viserys. She saw the lords whispering Jon's name. She saw Sansa's doubt, Tyrion's fear, Jon's silence. She saw her destiny slipping from her fingers like sand, and the only thing left to hold was fire. And the ground, the battle began. Grey Worm led the Unsullied through the gates. Jon fought beside them, cutting down Lannister soldiers who refused to surrender. But then something unexpected happened. The Lannister army dropped their weapons. The bells of the city rang out. Ding, ding, ding. Surrender. Jon stopped. His sword hung by his side, chest rising and falling. It was over, or it should have been. High above, Daenerys sat on Drogon, eyes locked on the Red Keep. And she remembered everything. Her brother Viserys, begging for a crown and dying with gold melted over his head. Khal Drogo, lost to death. Her child, never born. Her closest friend, Missandei, executed. Varys, burnt. Jorah, dead. And now Jon, her last hope, had pulled away from her too. Something cracked inside her. She whispered a single word, Dracarys, and Drogon dove. Fire fell like rain upon King's Landing. Flames swallowed the streets. Children screamed. Mothers ran with babies in their arms. Soldiers and civilians alike were turned to ash. Jon watched in horror as Daenerys unleashed destruction not on an army, but on the people. Women, men, children. It didn't matter. To her, this was justice. This was strength. "No!" Jon shouted, running into the streets, trying to stop the Unsullied from continuing the slaughter. But Grey Worm didn't listen. He was already lost in rage, cutting down the unarmed like they were enemies of war. Tyrion stood on the edge of the ruined gate, tears in his eyes. He had believed in her, protected her, and now he watched as she became everything he feared. The city crumbled. The Red Keep shook with fire and smoke. Inside the castle, Cersei and Jaime tried to escape through the tunnels, but even as the ceiling collapsed and the stone cracked around them, Cersei still denied the end. "She won't kill us," she kept whispering. "She needs the throne. She needs the city." But the city was already dead. Daenerys burned it all. When the fire finally stopped, nothing but ashes remained. Jon walked through the ruins, stepping over blackened bodies and charred stones. The air smelled of smoke and death. He passed a girl clutching her mother's corpse. Her face was covered in ash and blood. She didn't cry, she just stared at him. That moment hit him harder than any sword. Back at the Red Keep, Daenerys stood where the Iron Throne had once been. It was half melted now, its sharp blades twisted by dragon fire. She looked like a conqueror, but there was no joy in her eyes, only emptiness. Jon entered the throne room slowly. She turned to him. "I did what I had to do." Jon's voice shook. "You burned children." "I gave them freedom," she said. "Now they won't live in fear of tyrants." "They died in fear of tyrants." "They died in fear," Jon whispered. "In fire." She stepped closer. "It had to be done. You understand, don't you?" And in that moment, Jon Snow understood everything. He understood why Ned Stark had kept the truth from the world for so long. Because the truth was dangerous. Because the truth didn't just change power, it destroyed it. And now, standing before the woman he once believed in, Jon realized what must be done. The throne room was quiet except for the soft crackle of burning embers. Ash floated through the air like snow falling on broken stones and melted steel. Jon Snow stood in front of Daenerys Targaryen, his heart crushed beneath the weight of what he had seen. She was looking at the Iron Throne, half-burned, twisted, but still standing. Her face was calm now, almost peaceful, as if she had reached the end of a long road. "I was always meant to sit here," she said softly. "They were never going to give it to me. I had to take it." Jon's voice trembled. "At what cost?" She looked at him, eyes full of belief, of fury, of pain. "I freed them. They were slaves to fear. I broke their chains." Jon stepped closer, slowly. "But you killed them." "They were in the way," she said coldly. "If I didn't burn them, they would have raised their sons to fight me. I did what no one else had the courage to do. I gave the world peace." Jon stared at her like she was a stranger now. "This isn't peace," he whispered. "It's ashes." Daenerys reached for him. "You're a Targaryen too. We were meant to rule together, fire and ice, you and me." He stepped back. "I loved you," Jon said, "but I can't follow you." There was a long silence. The wind outside howled through the broken windows. "I am not your enemy, Jon," she said one last time. But in his heart, Jon knew the truth. She already was. Jon stepped forward and embraced her. Her arms wrapped around him slowly, her breath hitched in surprise. And then a blade slid between her ribs. Daenerys gasped. Her eyes widened, filled with shock and pain. Jon held her close as she collapsed in his arms, tears falling down his face. "I'm sorry," he whispered. You were what the world needed, but not like this." She died there, in his arms. The last Dragon Queen, the breaker of chains. The woman who wanted to build a better world but tried to do it with fire. Outside the keep, Drogon felt her death before it happened. His roar shattered the sky. He flew fast and wild through the burning clouds, landing in front of the throne room with a crash that shook the ground. Jon stood before the dragon, arms open, ready to die. But Drogon didn't burn him. Instead, the dragon looked at Daenerys' body, then at the Iron Throne. With one long, angry breath, he melted the throne down to molten steel. It was never about the throne. Then Drogon lifted her body gently in his claws and flew into the grey sky, disappearing beyond the clouds. And just like that, Daenerys Stormborn was gone. The aftermath was cold and quiet. Jon turned himself in. Grey Worm wanted blood. He chained Jon in a dark cell, shaking with rage. The Unsullied were ready for war again, this time in the name of justice. But Westeros had no more room for war. Tyrion, broken but still alive, gathered the remaining lords and ladies in the ruins of the Dragon Pit. Sansa came from Winterfell. Arya stood by her side. Bran, silent and watchful, was wheeled in by Samwell Tarly. They debated for hours who would rule, what to do with Jon, how to hold the kingdom together. In the end, the throne was gone. The wheel had truly been broken, and Bran Stark was chosen as king not by blood, but by decision. "The boy who sees everything," Tyrion had said. "He cannot be corrupted. He doesn't want power. That is why he must hold it." Sansa chose to remain queen in the North, independent, proud, and strong. Arya sailed west, seeking lands no map had drawn. And Jon, he was sent to the wall, again, to the place where his story began. At Castle Black, snow fell thick and quiet. Jon rode north with the free folk. Ghost ran beside him. He said nothing, but in his heart he carried every scar, every mistake, every truth that had cost him love, peace, and everything in between. He remembered Ned Stark's voice again, the soft lessons, the warnings, the silence that had protected him from the world's cruelty. Ned hadn't prepared him for war, he had prepared him for choice. And when the time came, Jon chose what his father could never say aloud. Sometimes the right thing is the hardest thing to do. As he disappeared beyond the wall into the true north, the realm behind him tried to heal. No kings, no thrones, no dragons, just stories. And somewhere in the wind, the voice of the quiet wolf whispered still, "Promise me, Jon." And he did.